Many, many years ago, in the town of Cape Town, South Africa, a ship came into the harbor at Table Bay. On the ship was a man named Jan van Hanks, or Jan van Hunks. Jan had left Cape Town many, many years ago, a lowly deckhand, and came back a prestigious captain of a very large ship. And he appeared to have amassed some wealth with him during that time. This caused a lot of chatter amongst the people living in Cape Town. A lot of rumors were spreading that Van Hanks was actually a pirate, that he had somehow escaped any sort of justice, and that instead he got to live a happily ever after kind of life in Cape Town. So some people were a little upset by that, but Van Hanks never paid much heed to these rumors. In fact, he didn't even go into town to speak to people. He just kept completely to himself at his little home on the side of Windberg, or Windy Mountain, as you would translate it to. So at the base of Windy Mountain, he had his little home. In his home, he had a few servants, some housekeepers, some people who worked outside. He had a few cows, some buck, some deer, or bokkies, as they would call them in South Africa, which is a normal thing at the time to have on like a little homestead. His workers grew vegetables for him, and he really had no reason to go into town. If he needed anything, he just sent them. What he did love to do was smoke his pipe. So he had this beautiful mahogany wood pipe, and he was known to have some of the best tobacco in the region, which was shipped to him on a fairly regular basis, since he was a pretty voracious smoker. So in the morning, Jan van Hanks would wake up. He would have a very strong cup of coffee, grab a couple sandwiches, maybe something to drink, some rum, some water. It kind of depended on the day. Take his package of tobacco with him and his pipe in his other pocket, and off he would go. And he would hike up the mountain until he found his favorite spot. So his favorite spot was a nice big rock on an outcrop overlooking Table Bay, and he would sit there for the rest of the day, simply filling his pipe with tobacco, lighting it up, taking his drags and smoking, and creating beautiful big smoke circles. And that's what he did, and watched these ships come in and out of Table Bay. Who knows what he was thinking, but that's what he was doing. So one day, Van Hanks is sitting there, and he's smoking his pipe, and he's in his own world, and suddenly he hears, turns around, and there he's shocked to see a man dressed in black heeled shoes with a silver buckle. The man's wearing what must be a very uncomfortable red woolen jacket, and on his head is one of the tallest black top hats that Van Hanks had ever seen. Keep in mind, Van Hanks had traveled the world, so he had seen his fair share of top hats. Good morning, he said. Good morning, Mr. Van Hanks. Do you mind if I sit down with you and smoke a pipe? I can see no reason why not to. Sure, said Van Hanks, and he shifted over so that the stranger could sit there. The stranger asked him, do you mind if I have some of your tobacco, since I have forgotten mine at home? Now Van Hanks is thinking that he would never forget his tobacco at home, but whatever, and he shares some of his tobacco with the stranger. And so the two of the men sit in silence at first, taking deep breaths in and inhaling and blowing out smoke. And the stranger blows out this massive smoke ring. Van Hanks sees this, and he takes in a very much deeper inhale, and he blows out an even bigger circle. Well, the stranger chuckles to himself, takes an even deeper breath in, and he blows out an even bigger circle. And so Van Hanks chuckling as well, as he realizes that he's potentially met his match. And so with that icebreaker, the two of them start talking, and they start discussing all sorts of things, who we will never know exactly what those things are, but they're discussing things. But slowly the discussions come back to smoking. And the stranger casually mentions, well, I once smoked an entire package of tobacco in one single sitting over a period of 3 hours. And I have never seen anyone do that before. Well, says Van Hanks, I once smoked 2 packages of tobacco in 3 hours, and I felt wonderful. And I blew the biggest, most amazing rings of smoke that you have ever seen. And so the conversation turned into this besting one another. And back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, the two of them started discussing their old smoking habits, who blew the biggest smoke rings, who smoked for the longest, who smoked the most. And the two carried on like this for quite some time before the stranger finally said, I have an idea. Why don't we have a smoking competition? And Van Hanks, who loved smoking and loved competitions, said, yes, let's do it. And so the two shook hands and they sat down. Well, they were sitting down already, but maybe they stood up, stretched their legs a little bit, and then sat down again. And they started smoking again. In the beginning, they were chatting and just sort of blowing small, modest smoke rings. They needed to conserve some of their energy. But they carried on smoking and they carried on talking, and things were still sort of friendly. And slowly around them, the smoke sort of started building up. It kind of started settling around their feet, going up around their heads. And if you were in Cape Town that day and you were looking up at the mountain, you would slowly start to see what looked like fog kind of creeping up the mountain and creeping down Windy Mountain. And it slowly kind of progressed as the day went on. The men, unaware of the smoke that they were creating, that it was visible from down the bottom, kept on smoking. And strangely enough, the tobacco pouch just never seemed to get empty. There just seemed to be a continuous amount of tobacco. And so these men smoked and smoked and smoked and smoked and smoked. And they carried on breathing in big breaths of smoke and blowing out bigger and bigger smoke circles. And the day went into night, and the next morning came, and they were still sitting there smoking. And this carried on for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Van Hanks was starting to feel a little tired from lack of sleep, but he was still motivated to beat this strange person with the big pointy hat. And he was busy filling his pipe when he looked over and he noticed the stranger was starting to look a little green around the gills. He wasn't looking so healthy anymore. Before he could ask him if he was okay, the stranger just suddenly seemed to choke. And he was coughing. And he was kind of gripping at his throat. And next thing you know, he fell over. And Van Hanks jumped up, wanting to help his friend. But what he saw made him stop. There in front of him lay his friend, and his hat had been knocked off his head. And on his head was the longest pair of black, shiny horns that Van Hanks, well, had ever seen on an animal, let alone on a human being. And instantly he knew what he was looking at. "Yo, devil!" he yelled out, which translates to "you devil. I knew you were coming for me." And in an instant, both of them disappeared. There was a flash of lightning, there was a clap of thunder, and all that was left on the ground was a burnt mark on the grass. And they disappeared. And all they left was a blanket of smoke that seemed to completely envelop Cape Town, the mountain, Table Mountain. And those who living in Cape Town were able to look up, and to them it looked like a tablecloth had kind of fallen over the mountain and was running down the side into Windyberg. Now, how do we know that Van Hanks disappeared? How do we know that he didn't just fall off the mountain and die somewhere? Well, we know this because one of his workers, concerned that his boss had been gone for so many days, came up looking for him. And he was able to spy through this thick, foggy smoke the instant that Van Hanks and the devil disappeared. And he ran down and he told everybody about what they saw and what he saw. And so the tale continued. The name of Windyberg, Windberg, changed, and it became known as Devil's Peak, which it's still known as today. And Table Mountain is still known for this tablecloth that comes on every single summer. And so when the locals see the tablecloth appear once again on their beloved Table Mountain, they know that the devil and Van Hanks are once again dueling for Van Hanks' soul. And it's said that if Van Hanks simply conceded and he simply allowed the devil to win, that he would win his soul back. And Van Hanks, being the proud man that he is, refuses to do that. And so we will see every year this smoky, foggy tablecloth on Table Mountain. And the day that we stop seeing that will be the day that Van Hanks finally gives in and allows the devil to win. And that is the story of Jan van Hunks and how Table Mountain got its name. Thank you.